Welcome to the 17th episode of The Save File. I am your host, Glauber Costa. For decades, I was an atheist, because that is, after all, what smart people do. In my late 30s, entirely through rational means, I became a Christian, following my conclusion that people who die tend to stay dead, with one exception throughout history. The Save File is where I have conversations with other rational-minded people about their faith. My guest today is John Larsen, a software developer from Norway, who enjoys PHP and doesn't seem to like Java very much. He was raised into a fringe Christian church with 8 siblings, and after seeing that church dissolve, got into his own path to test his faith, landing where he is today. At some point, John has read 200 books in a year, with more than 40 in a month. We talked about the church fathers, the Didache, and had a very intellectually satisfying discussion about what constitutes belief. John, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm excited to have you because one of the reasons I started to do the podcast is that I wanted to get to know people and get to know people at a personal level, because sometimes we have those conversations. We're in tech, we meet each other at conferences. Life brings us together for technical reasons, but we never have the time to sit down and get to know each other. But you're a special case because, again, I don't know you at all, and I always love when I have guests that now I'm not only getting to know the person behind the tech, I'm actually getting to know a new person altogether. We made friends like that. I mean, there's people who came to the podcast that I actually met in real life later, so I'm super excited. But you're even more special case because you sent me an email saying that you would love to come to the podcast. And the reason you sent me an email is that you're not on Twitter. Or as I said, you're very little. So
very little,
how's life outside in the real world, man? Because I don't even remember. How...
Well, right now I check Twitter often because there's the news about this election that is going on that I'm kind of following. So that's where you get things the fastest. But other than that, I usually just forget about it until there is some activity or some bored moment, and I just check in, But I've always found it difficult to do Twitter because I don't feel at home there,
Why is that?
If you start doing something, you need to follow up, and then you need to get the traction, and then you need to work that traction like crazy. And then you see that there's 5 people that saw it. And
a lot of people have issues with addiction, of course, and this is a topic that shows up often, I guess, in the podcast. And I'm guilty as charged. My problem is that I can't stop doom scrolling. And again, I know I'm not the only one, but I am terminally online. I'm on Twitter all the time. It messes up with your mind. I'm aware of that. So in a sense, I mean, as I said, it is great that it's just not a part of your life.
Well, not a big part, at least. I do a lot of other things. I'm watching a lot of YouTube, so I'm still online.
How much time do you spend on YouTube?
Oh, while I'm coding at home, I'm having it on constantly. So I feel like I watch all the interesting things, and then when there's nothing more to watch, I'm like, okay, now I can put it away a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the algorithm is always pushing stuff towards you as well, right?
But when the algorithm starts to suffer a little bit, then I'm like, okay, now there's something from last year there. So.
Yeah, it's funny because a while back, I had this sense that, look, there's always some stuff, right? There's always some stuff. But recently I've been feeling a little bit more like, the old television thing where you just zap from channel to channel, right? And there's nothing there. Sometimes it feels like that. Like the algorithm gives you the videos, but none of them are things that you want to click. So it happens to me like every now and then.
Yeah, I actually started a new job last year in August, and then I started learning Laravel. I was PHP developer, but without Laravel before. So then I started watching Laravel videos and things like that, and that really upped my time on YouTube.
Who do you watch on the topic?
I think I watch everybody that is around. It started with some tutorials, and then we have access to this Lara, what is called the place where you go for Laravel tutorials. I don't remember.
I don't know, man. I deal a lot with the Laravel folks now. Our product is doing super well and starting to see a lot of interest in that community.
The Laracast, okay, yeah,
Laracast, yeah. I had Josh Siri on, which is one of the big folks. We called the episode Laravel and the Lord, and then we talked about it. It was super cool. It was if you haven't watched it, like it was our last episode. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm still a little bit on the fence if I really love Laravel, but I kind of get the idea of it nowadays. So yeah.
And you live in Norway, right?
Yes, I do.
You mentioned, you were born in Norway, I presume, and lived there your whole life?
I was born in Finland. I finished a mom and a Norwegian dad, so
okay.
I'm bilingual or trilingual, and then I learned English as well. So I'm four languages.
Yeah. My co-founder is Finnish.
Yeah, that's cool.
From my startup of Pekka. I guess I've been told that half of Finland is called Pekka anyway. Just but that's what he says. I mean, just there's no racism here of any sort. But like it's just we know each other for 15 plus years now, and we've been working together for a long time. I've been to Finland a couple of times. Yeah. I've been to his previous home. He moved homes now. But it's a place that I like a lot. And I've never been to Denmark, never been to Sweden, but I've been to Norway once. As I was telling you, I actually got stuck in Norway. I couldn't. Yeah. I could leave Norway, but I was living in Russia at the time, and then I had an issue with my passport. I could not go back to Russia, and then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna stay here until I try to figure this out, which I didn't for a week, and then then I moved to. Too expensive for me to just be in Norway. But I had a great time. Other than that, and it was a beautiful place. I was in Oslo.
Yeah, I lived in Oslo for 11 years, something. So
and you're doing tech for how long, John? You said that you just got a new job. You're getting new to Laravel, but just in general.
I've done tech since 2004. I got my degree. So I did my degree in Java, but I went straight ahead and did PHP and JavaScript, and then from there I haven't looked back at Java at all. So it's but it's kind of tricked us because the PHP community in Norway has never been big, and I wanted to do PHP, so the bachelor was named Bachelor in Web Programming, but then they started teaching us Java, and PHP was like 5 points, and .NET was 5 points, and then the rest was Java. And so the last year they come and say, well, we it's our fault.
In 2004, it kind of makes sense. I remember the first time I looked into programming, you could do Java applets right in the browser, and that's a thing that a lot of people did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did a lot of like enterprise things and stuff. But we didn't.
How is the tech industry in Norway? Is there like any relevant companies there that you would highlight, or just what are the things that usually employ people?
Not any big ones. They have these big consultant firms that have a lot of customers and do most of the work, I guess. And then we have a few startups. And that's what I worked on. I worked on a startup for 11 years. No, 12 years, I think. Something. So, and then there are more famous ones, I think, from Sweden, like Spotify. They have more traction on these big things.
Yeah, Norway has always fascinated me. I mean, it sounds like such an interesting place because you have all this wealth from oil and gas, and it destroys almost every country. Right? The people even say the oil curse, but Norway somehow apparently found a way to live with that, and in a way that boosts the country. Right?
Norway, they did this nice thing that they invested in stocks all over the world with the oil money. So most of it is not accessible to us. We just save it up until we need it.
Okay.
So we have this. We get the interest, and then we use it for welfare, basically. So it's a good deal.
And you mentioned, like when we were chatting before the show, you mentioned that you have 8 siblings.
Yes.
So you're a family of 9.
Yes. So that's a big family.
This is not common in Norway, is it?
No, it's not. It's common in the church that my father was from.
Okay.
So they had this thing that that children are a blessing, and all of them had big families. So it was like encouraged, and you didn't never talk about something like what's called in English.
Well, I guess it's not
prevention.
It's not a hindrance. Yeah.
So you even talked about it. So I think it's just like hush hush. You should have children. So yeah. So
no, it's fantastic. This is great because like a lot of people talk about it. Like 10 years ago, everybody was talking about overpopulation, right?
Yeah.
And then the fear now is that we're going to have a population collapse because nobody's having children.
Yeah.
You look at countries like Japan, you look at countries like South Korea, they're worse than the West. The West is in decline, but you look at Japan, the Asians are as far as I understand, the worst. But when you look at religious communities, and then there are all sorts of theories as to why, but when you look at religious communities, they tend to have more children. And
yeah, they do.
The Mormons are a big example. I had a lot of guests that are Mormons because for whatever reason, apparently a lot of the front-end developer community in the US at least is LDS. I had Ken Dodds on my podcast. I had other people on my podcast as well. And they all have like 5+ kids and things like that. And I myself, I've got to be honest about this. I don't think I would have 3 kids if it wasn't for my conversion. Like, just maybe 2, maybe I think I would have been fine with 1. The second, I think I would be okay with. I don't think I would have had a 3rd child if it wasn't for my conversion. Catholicism, it's interesting because, most people today, they say most people from Catholic countries, they will say they're Catholic, but that means nothing. It just means, I was born in a country with a Catholic history. But people who truly believe that, I mean, children are also encouraged, and I would love to have more. I mean, if it was up to me, I think I would have 4 or 5.
I have only 1 right now. I hope to have more, but we will see. Because I come from a big family, I'm okay with them. It's not that difficult, that big of a thing to me to watch children and be their best friend, but it's difficult for my wife more than because she's only child.
Yes,
right. So it's a new world for her, basically.
I have 1 brother, but my father had 12 siblings, so he beat you by 4. But like
my uncle has 15 children, so it's but that's
they
one
were
of
born.
uncles.
Yeah. They were born, but one of them was eaten by an alligator. I told that story before,
yeah,
so like
I
I think they didn't grow up all together. But
it's funny story from my father's. My father had 10 siblings, and my father's mother's family was also big. And then once back someplace in my mother's father, I think they got a medal for having 10 men in the family that went to the military.
A medal sounds wild. Like developing kids to get a medal. Like
exactly. But they were all in the military, and they got the medal from the king because of that. So
wow, that's insane. And I mean, it's and especially like it's not that it's a chore to make the children, right? Raising them, it's worse. But like it sounds wild to me that you get a medal. I'm going to ask around in here in Canada if I get a medal after a certain number. Maybe I'm a competitive person. Like I've been telling my wife, like a lot of our friends now from church, like they had 2 kids. Some of them got a 3rd kid, which is the same number that I have. And then I kept telling my wife, look, we need to win this. Like I'm in it to win it. That's how I roll, right? So we need the 4th kid before them, just that we need to get there first. So I'll inquire about medals because it's always an incentive.
It is.
How is it to grow up with 8 siblings, man? Like
it's
my kids are always fooling around. Like the 3 of them together. I don't think this house will survive. And I imagine like putting 8 kids, it's weird. Like I can't even fathom.
Yeah, I find myself now to think about when I play with my kid. I play a lot with my kid, but I never remember me playing with my father or mother ever.
Yes,
they were kind of facilitating for us to play, and then we played together, and we didn't need to play with them. While my kid is always asking, "Dad, can we play? Can I play? Can I play?" And yeah, so I guess we take care of each other a lot.
Yes, I suppose for the kids it's better to play with other kids as well, right? So just if you have your siblings to play with you.
But we didn't go to kindergarten because we had a kindergarten at home. My mom was home all the time, so we didn't have the need, basically. And then when we went to school, when we went to school, all our friends wanted to come to visit us because we could make football teams and all these things. So, so yeah.
I want to poke on something that you said there, and this is a great segue for us to explore the faith part of the conversation. You said, and maybe this was intentional, maybe this wasn't, but you said my father's church.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you're not in the same church. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said that. So I would love to learn about what is this church? Because I'm assuming it doesn't have a recognizable name, or you would have said it. Like it's not like Lutherans or whatever. So I'd love to learn more about this church where you grew up and what made you seek other fields.
Yeah, so this church started from the Pentecostal movement in the beginning of the 1900s. I think many churches started, and then the founder, he differed from the Pentecostal by going in this Pelagian way of thinking that you have to earn your way to salvation, kind of. Not necessarily earn your way to salvation, but earn your way to heaven by looking at Jesus as an example rather than a savior, in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So this church has become very conservative, and they all.
By the way, is that the position that this church had, or the one it departed from?
They had, and they still have pretty much a lot of that still. But the thing is, when there was a leadership change in the early 1990s, then my dad was opposing the leadership of this, the new leadership that went from father to son, and he said that no, we shouldn't go that way. We should choose another one, and then they were kicked out from the church, basically.
Okay.
And then my father continued to oppose the church, and it becomes this thing that he was not allowed to go there, and we never went back, basically.
So what is the name, first of all? Just set the stage. What is the name of that church?
The official name now is Brunstad Christian Church.
Brunstad?
Brunstad, yes. It's a place here in Norway where they have their big conferences. And they are everywhere in the world, but I think most people are in Norway, and it's like maybe 10,000 in Norway, and then 10,000 spread all over the world. So it's like 20,000 people part of it. So it's not a big movement, but it has this. In Norway, they are. If you tell you from this church, then people usually have heard about it, and they have some preconceived notions about what it's about, and they are like, okay,
what are those preconceived notions? Yeah.
Well, they're always talking about money in the church because they need to build something, build bigger churches, build this and that, but they're very hardworking people, so they go and help each other and work on like this. In Norway, it's called dugnad. You go work for free together with people on doing some job, but they use it as building buildings and churches and expanding. And then they are known for big families as well. So they have always been like this, big families, work a lot, and always dresses in skirts and never cut their hair, and yeah.
Well, both men and women, because they are. Yeah.
All women do not. But they are.
I've heard of many Pentecostal churches that, because where I grew up, I had exposure to things like that as well. As I said, I did not grow up as a Christian at all, but I knew about those. We would call them evangelicals, and maybe they didn't call it. Maybe they had a distinction, but from the outside, it was all like, "Oh, those are evangelicals." And some of them had those rules as well, that like all women don't cut their hair, and they always use long skirts, and it's
back in the 50s, maybe 60s, maybe even 70s. They were not that different from other churches in like the outward appearance, but they kept it for longer, so they became less progressive in many ways. But then when this the break happened, the church that continued outside, they became even more conservative than the inside people. So we were a small group.
Meaning your father, like, because your father was kicked out, so he was on the outside, right?
Yeah. So many of them it was like when they inside the church started accepting television and things like that. They were like, hey, they are accepting the world, the influence from the outside. We should never do that. And
so computers, no computers as well.
Yeah, but computers were. My dad was a special case, because he was he was an eccentric kind of guy, so he liked to have these computers. So he bought them used, and we had like 11 different computers that we picked and chose and built and figured out.
Sometimes, sometimes I do, like, this is half joke, half truth, but like I look at people like the Amish and maybe they know something that we don't, man, because like it's a blessing. Again, half joking, but it's a blessing to have what we have today. But I think we lose so much as well. We gain a lot materially, and I don't think I would trade it for the life in the past. But it's important to acknowledge that I think we do lose things on the way, right?
We do.
And one of them being the big family, right? Just it's a great thing that we cannot accommodate in our world today. And also no JavaScript. No JavaScript is already an advantage, right? And if getting rid of computers is the way to get rid of the JavaScript, I mean, it might be worth it. It might be worth it. I don't know. Yeah.
Go native. Assemble.
Yeah. No, I'm enjoying the story. So like your father is in this extremely conservative church, and it's funny that you mentioned that. Is Pelagianism something that you attribute to church, or would they call themselves?
They wouldn't. No, I don't.
Wouldn't, right?
I never seen them. They do it, but then I have analyzed a little bit what they believe, and that's what I figure out they are kind of. Maybe not exactly, but they have this aspect of it that is very clear. And because of this, they are always talking about like sin, and they have to fight against the sin that they have in their lives, and then it's all going about sin and sin and sin. And that's I never quite got it. Why should we fight against something that we have? We are like in our nature. Yes, we should fight it, but not like the main thing in our holiness and journey.
Yes. So you get out of so your father gets the whole family out of this in the 90s, and by then you're how many already in the family?
By then we are almost all. We are maybe 7 children or so. It was 90s.
Okay, so more comes later, right?
So 1 or 2 later. Yeah, I think. Because it was just in this period from 1990 to 1993, I think it happened, or 89 to 93. So, and there's of course like we moved from Norway to Finland, and in that period, and a lot of things changed, of course. But when we moved back to Norway,
moving from Norway to Finland for the Americans and Canadians in the audience is like going next door, right?
Basically, small countries.
20-minute walk down the road, and you're there, right? So just to put things into perspective, like it's not like it's moving. They're going to Finland, which is like
it's going from one state to another,
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, I bet that all the Nordics would. I never actually did the comparison explicitly, but I think all the Nordics probably fit inside Texas.
Yeah.
It's quite possible that, right? Texas in particular, Ontario, where I am, is also like a very, very large province. Not all states in the US are like that. Not all provinces in Canada are like that, but like some of them are, and I think you can fit a lot of Europe in Texas alone, right?
Yeah.
And then how does it progresses from that? Because like it doesn't seem to me that you are still in whatever church your father left for, right?
No, because
so there's more in the story.
We were on this smaller church that broke out for quite a while, until I was, I think I would say 14. We still went to these meetings because my mama went to them and wanted to stay, and my dad as well kind of supported that, and we continued. And then when we moved to a smaller place, just 2,000 people lived there, the small place in Norway, we kind of started figuring out that, hey, there is this church, but there's also other churches, local churches. We don't need to travel for two hours to get to a church. We can just go down the street and there's a church, right? So we started attending these youth groups that are more, I think it was in Methodist church, but because it was a so small place, so everybody went to the Methodist church, even if you're Baptist or other kinds of Christian. So that became our youth group period of life that opened up a lot of new kind of ideas into our theology, So
would you say that you grew up without that exposure?
Yeah.
And you said that because a lot of people who come from tight-knit communities,
all the other
like this.
churches were not
don't
true
know,
churches.
right.
They were something we didn't talk about in positive terms. So
we didn't talk about it in positive terms, but you talked about it. You knew about them and
yes,
etc. But
but not much. We didn't engage with them. So
okay,
we had some friends, I think, that came that my mom befriended that were from some other churches, but we never got the impression that this is a church we should, or that it was a church at all, that she went to. It was just another Christian that visited us or something like that. So I never got this this feeling of belonging in a church, in my church, no, the family church. And then when we started figuring out that, there's other churches, I didn't know what to choose from, why should I go to this church and not that church and all this? So it's kind of a mess in the head when you just choose what is, and then you kind of wait until you grow up in order to make the final decision. And
how old are you at that point?
I'm 14, 15, 14 or 15, yeah. So, but that's also when I started reading books, and I started with my mom's bookshelf, and then I continued into the library and got books from there.
Well, if you're not on Twitter, you must spend your time doing something else. And I do notice that you have a full bookshelf behind you.
Yeah.
So the books are great. Yeah.
There are 3 behind me and 1 on the side, and then there are 3 in front of me as well.
Yeah, so cool stuff, man. I used to read a lot. I read a lot less today, which is a shame. For anybody listening to this, you should read. You should not be on social media.
I read less.
This is something I wish. Yeah.
I read less after I got married because time is less, and then when I got a child, even less. So now I'm stuck at I think it's 1.5 books a week or something. So it's still a lot.
And what is the moment? Yeah,
but it's I was on par to reading 200 books a year before.
That's a lot. I don't think I ever got to that point.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's. I still wish sometimes that I was able to do that now.
Yeah.
So it's.
I don't think I ever counted, and I used to read a lot, but 200 a year it's almost a book a day.
Almost.
One of them, I doubt one of them was The Lord of the Rings. It can't be.
No, I don't read much much fiction at all. I read most non-fiction, but some of them are Dostoevsky's. They are thick.
Mm-hmm.
And my record is 44 books in a month, so that's my highest achievement.
Congratulations! You should get a medal for that, not for the kids. Yeah. That is actually hard.
1 book a day keeps something away.
Yeah, precisely. So do you, in this journey, which is a super interesting journey, do you have a moment in which you look around and say, hey, look, I've been, the world is not like I used to think it is, and something changes in your mind? Or
not really, because it's happened so slowly. I did a lot of when I was 15 and 16. I did a lot of debating online on IRC and on the forums, because the online started to become more popular back in it must have been 2000s or something, early 2000s, and I learned a lot of that because I met a lot of atheists there and different believers, and I had to make a choice that what should I I be skeptical of my own faith, or should I accept it? What should I accept of it? So I decided to have this approach that I will check all the arguments, and then I will always give God the chance to like defend himself, basically. So I ended up keeping my faith, but also having this doubt about that I cannot know all the specifics, and I don't think the specific matters as much as all the churches think they do.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at the early church, they believed so many things as well that is far from what we believe now. Even Catholics have lost lots of what they used to have in the early days, and nowadays they say to you that you should be Christian and you should read the Bible, but back then they didn't even have the Bible, So
precisely. Again, I try to avoid going into like large debates in the podcast because it's really just not the goal. But this is something that for me kept me away from Protestantism in general, was looking and the reason I'm bringing this up is that clearly you got to a different point from the same thing, right? But for me, what I look into is that I can't accept sola scriptura as a foundation.
Neither can I.
Yeah, because there was no scripture in the first 200 years, and like people say, first of all, in the first 20 years, there was no scripture at all. There was only the Old Testament. But first 20 years of the church is already there. But even the Gospels were not there. So there is nothing for them to look into. And I think whatever is valid for us should be valid for them. Otherwise, it's just not the same thing. And then you start having the epistles and etc. And people say, some Protestants will say, and then the Bible came about. But hold on, not that simple, because there were a lot of books that people accepted as scripture at that time that later were rejected, and vice versa, right? So it can't be, and this is the problem that I have with the phrase sola scriptura.
Mm.
It can't be that alone. That's the word sola, right? You can look at it as clearly this is something important, but you can't be your only judge, right?
I agree. That's why I have so many different books here, and one of my favorite authors is a Catholic philosopher, I would say, called Joseph Piper.
I'm not. I'm ashamed now. I think it feels like I should be familiar.
Yeah, I found him. I found him a few, like maybe 10 years back, and I have read most of his works, and it's just it's just very good, But he doesn't.
I will ask you for one recommendation, but here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go into a book competition with you because I'm clearly going to lose. Apparently, almost everybody will. I mean, just look at for the people who are listening to the podcast without watching. This dude has a respectable bookshelf behind him. It's impressive. So,
but so I would recommend you to look into to Joseph Pieper. He's a German philosopher, theologian, and he's a Catholic, I think. He is from there. So, but he wrote about leisure. I think was one of his big things, And I find it's like this thing that nobody other Christian I have heard talk about, leisure.
Leisure, as in free time, or just
free time.
Well, because I mean, most of modern theology comes from America these days. Americans don't know what free time is. It's a foreign concept. It's not something that is part of the life in North America. Just
and our modern life in total, I think it lacks a lot of the shoulders down, So I guess maybe that
you touched on my favorite subject, though, because again, this is very personal for me, because the journey that I've been through, that I shared on the podcast many times by now, is that at around the same age, I was around 14, 15, and a lot of that on IRC as well. So I was just not in Norway. So maybe that's why we didn't run into each other. But I just rejected religion altogether, right? But from coming, I was not raised on a religious community. Religion for me was something very distant, and it was more of like the cultural background of the place I grew up at. But why like you said, I want to explore that because you said I wanted to give God a chance, but ultimately, do you think this was just you injecting what atheists would call maybe some bias into that and say, look, I mean, just I want to look into that, but I kind of know that there's something good from here that I don't want to reject? Or do you sense that you looked into the question objectively and really try to find a rational foundation for what you were looking for?
There definitely was some bias, of course, because internet was not that big back then, so you couldn't like just order a book of any topic, right, to check. So I had to check what books I could find, and one of those books were the Errors in the Bible, written by what's his name again? Torrey, R.A. Torrey. His name, I don't know what his name is, but Torrey. And when the atheists on the forums were like saying, this is a contradiction, this is a contradiction, this is a contradiction, I think, okay, I need to read something on it because I need to figure out if it is a contradiction. So I found this book and I read it, and it explained a lot of those contradictions and the kind of the how to resolve them in a way. And many of them were not contradictions, but I showed why they are not. But the atheists were still using those examples, even if I told them and I showed them, and there was no way in to change their mind about it. So I found it when I met the same arguments again and again, and I couldn't see any. They were more religious about it than I was, right?
This is something I haven't noticed until much later, but I think you're right, because people talk about bias, and I had this conversation with a particular friend of mine all the time that says that I'm biased, and now, right? Just but looking back, I think bias cuts both ways, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, you're religious, and that means you have a bias. So when you look into those things, you have a bias to find those things. But what I noticed is that when I was an atheist, I had a bias as well. And in fact, noticing this was one of the trigger points for me to come to my religious life today. Not because I think I'm free of bias today. I probably do have a bias, but because I spent maybe 20 years thinking I do not have a bias. This is atheism is the position without the bias. And it was not the only thing I noticed, but this was like the last thing, like the straw that broke the camel's back. But I noticed, hold on, I do have a bias around here. I can't say that like the atheist position officially is that like this is the objective look into the scenario, and then the religious, it comes with the bias. But we all have our biases at the end of the day, right? Just and if you look deep enough, you will find it. And I have them today. And I think I'll have them forever, just the way it is. But you just have to make the effort into trying to figure out, like, okay, what is true or not. But saying that you don't have a bias, it's probably...
But the thing is about bias, you can start with having no bias, but then you build that bias when you start reading and checking facts. What is this about? And then, okay, I made an opinion about that. And next time you meet that, you have a bias because you have already made that opinion. On one side
but again, when you're doing this, you're already alive for 15 years, so you read things before in the past, and that's in that sense that I think we're all. It's impossible to even start without the bias, because you can't really ignore objectively everything you've seen and read and heard and experienced in your life. And you know, in my case, I think it was a lot about my friend group. I mean, my friend group was very atheistic, and so you have this bias that a lot of atheists will accuse religious people of, which is, oh, you know, you're part of this community, so if you don't want to, you're going to become an outcast. It's something about social acceptance. But I think I had that. I looking into those things objectively, maybe I could have resolved this too. Yeah, the Catholic Church is not the place for me, but the God is still real. And I think, again, depending on who the people were around me at the time, I would have reached a completely different conclusion. So there you go. You got your biases, right? Yeah. And it's easier today, as you mentioned, because today it's easier not to be limited by the people you have around you and by the resources you have around you. Just go online and find whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that definitely. And I find one of the ways I kind of challenge my bias is to read the atheist. Read the literature that is like against what I believe. I like, for instance, very well Bart Ehrman. He's not an atheist, but
Bart Ehrman is one of the people who converted me to not Catholicism, Christianity.
Yeah.
And this is wild because I mean he's an and I think it was much like a story that you shared earlier. So for me it was something like he is showing all of those problems in the Bible, but in showing me, because it's not just Bart Ehrman is a great scholar, so he's not just saying, oh, this thing is problematic. He's showing you exactly like the copies and how they happen and how they diverge, and in seeing the mechanism through which we can know where the errors are, I think I was able to trace back. But hold on, I mean, that also means that those other things are not errors. Right? So
exactly.
It's not just errors versus no errors. Like, okay, so yeah, this change. I mean, one of the things that I learned from Bart Ehrman that I think is fascinating is that one of the most famous stories in the Bible today, which is the whore cast the first stone.
First stone.
Yeah, it's not there, right? So, but then how do we know it's not there? It's not there because it was not in manuscripts before the 11th century, and then in the 11th century shows up. But around the 4th century, it starts to show up next to some of the Bibles, but not necessarily in some of the Gospels. But what that tells you is that we can trace this back. I mean, if you can detect that this thing started appearing in the 11th century, you can know that the rest of the text was there from the 1st century, and then you start. It put me it showed me this in a perspective that I haven't considered before, and it's funny because for most people, Bart Ehrman is what takes you out. For me, he was fundamental in
For me, it's one of the best challenges. What I think, and then I need to rethink and kind of look at it from the critical perspective, everything, And but I did have a year of theology, and the first thing I did after finishing my normal years of schooling, so 1 year at university, theology. So I was kind of prepared for more how things work in the scientific way when it goes to looking at the Bible and all those things. So I think that helps a lot in my life to see that, okay, I know some things, I cannot believe this necessarily, but I can use out what you can believe and what you cannot believe and all those things. And even what is faith and what is not, because this story about a woman, it doesn't mean that it's fake story necessarily. It can have another tradition that made it come to life. That's
right. Yes. But it's. I think it's important to notice as well that could be is different than we know it.
Exactly.
We have evidence to believe that is right. It could be, and in fact, I think I've done a Dunning-Kruger thing with that story, because at the beginning it was like, whoa, it's totally fake. And then later I found out that Bart conveniently forgets to mention that, again, it's not that the story shows up for the first time in the 11th century. The story is older, is just circulating not in the gospel, it's circulating in different ways. But it could have been something that people made up earlier, or it could have been a different tradition coming but you just don't know. And I think this is where the bias comes in, right? Because it's very easy to say, oh, this is very Jesus-like, so maybe it's true. But reality is that if you don't know, there's nothing to say about it, right?
Yeah, that's true.
What was the thing? Did you have anything in your teenage years that almost got you out of it? I mean, something very persuasive that you said you entertained and said, look at this. Yeah, this must be it. This must be it. And there is no God.
Not really. No. I could have at maximum maybe become more agnostic about things,
okay,
and stayed that way. But I never managed to give up my faith.
Why do you think that is? Is it from an experiential
both
point of view, or
both experience and what I read, basically? There are so many things that kind of reinforce your faith, maybe a Christian hears those stories more than others, of course, because they go to church and they hear stories from all over the world and read stories from all over the world. They read C.S. Lewis. They read all these great people who wrote convincingly, and you cannot say anything against them, kind of. And you have to kind of take many of the stories with like a pinch of salt, but still there has to be something through with them. And then in my own life as well, I have had a lot of these kind of stories about somebody telling me something or argument something, and then I go to my bookshelf and take a book, and then there was an answer to that argument right there.
Well, why would you attribute? Because I was obviously aware of all of that as an atheist, but I wouldn't, and I think maybe that's the bias we're talking about, maybe not. But in my mind, it was always like, look, this is just a coincidence, right? You find, I think the atheistic point of view is like, if you can model the world into like a series of explainable, repeatable, natural phenomena, and leave some room for, we don't know all the phenomena, right? But they're repeatable. We just haven't figured out the mechanism yet. I think that's the thing that is enticing for people about atheism, because essentially, hey, look, I mean, it's all about knowledge pursuit and pursuing this repeatability, pursuing the scientific method, and we don't need to necessarily pull God into the story. And I think what is underneath that, it means like we don't need to invoke this. It's not common to phrase it like that, but I think what is underneath is like we don't need to call into the supernatural.
Yeah.
Or that, right? So what was your relationship with the supernatural in that story?
I think I never liked the word supernatural, because I don't think God is supernatural at all. I just think he is like more natural than anything. He is the creator of the natural, so he can order the natural, and he's not something outside necessarily of the natural. Mm-hmm. So I don't like it that when the argument comes that can he make a stone that he cannot lift, then he is not strong enough to lift the stone, or he cannot create that stone.
But that's not about being supernatural. I think that for example,
that's the idea that people put into the word supernatural, mm-hmm. because it's something that we cannot fathom, right? But we can, I think, fathom the natural, and then we can fathom most of what God is, right?
Well, terms and definitions, but I think when most people understand when they say natural and supernatural, what they mean is like a rule-based system versus a will-based system. Because if there's a supernatural event, then there's a set of rules about how the world works, and then there's an entity that through his will can just decide that those rules don't apply at that point in time. And I would love to hear your perspective. Yeah. If you truly believe that there is no supernatural, how do you see the resurrection? Like, was Jesus's resurrection a natural event?
No, that's
and if it is a natural, if it's a natural event, what does that prove, right?
Yeah, for me, it's like God is supernatural in the sense that he made nature, right? But he and rules within that. But then he also has some rules himself, right? So those rules he told us in the Bible. So he doesn't go out from that framework of his own rules that is kind of more than nature in a sense. So he can go into history or not back, but and do those things that he needs to do in order to make his plan.
If an angel appeared right now during the podcast, by the way, if there's any angels around here that want to materialize and be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. but most atheists would consider that impossible.
Yeah,
because that's not a natural event, right? But in the Bible, there, not in a podcast. There were no podcasts, I presume, in biblical times, but there are many occurrences. The most important and famous of them, when the angels appear to the Blessed Mother, and so I mean, this is an apparition, right? So how do you think those things are possible or impossible?
Possible.
but not natural, or do you think they're just natural? It's just is your position that nature is just more complex than what we know it to be? Or okay,
that's what I would say. But like in the sense that when God is the moving mover, you know, the first mover, he can also move inside time as well, you know, and be the first mover of doing things that would seem supernatural. For us,
I find this different. I find this different than the naturalistic position. By the way, I don't like the term materialism.
Yeah.
I prefer the term naturalism because I do think that there are non-physical things that are natural. But I think the main difference here for me is that, and let me know if you agree or disagree with that statement, but the atheistic position would say, look, there is a set of things that we know, and there is a set of things that we don't yet know. But we can't. But the main difference is that, but we can know. So as we study, as we develop experiments, everything is accessible to us through the naturalistic laws, the physical laws of the universe. And if I understand you correctly, you believe that everything is, in a sense, natural and rule-bound, but not all of those things are accessible to us, but there are other beings and other entities and other parts of the universe that just the human mind, I mean, it's close to us, but they're still bound to their own set of rules. Is this what you're defending? Is just
the kind of I mean, I haven't thought that much into the supernatural because I'm very focused on us, you know, here. And I don't like to go too much into things that we cannot know about that much. We have no proof of those things. So I haven't thought much about those things. I don't think that those are very important. I
want to dispute that because the resurrection, and I hope you agree with me. I mean, but the resurrection of the Lord is very important because if that didn't happen, then why are we here?
Yeah,
right?
Just that comes against from belief, right? So I'm willing to believe those things happened because of the people who saw it are trustworthy people, right? The people who wrote it down and I trust them because I see that they have no reason to lie.
Mm-hmm.
And
what I mean is that this is an example, like when you say like those things don't interest me too much. I mean, that one thing might interest you in knowing. Otherwise, because for me this is very foundational. Maybe this is where we disagree, but like
I mean, it's foundational for faith, but it's not foundational from my life in a sense, because I kind of just it's like when churches are sometimes very much into this end time things, you know. That's something I'm like, okay, I cannot say anything about those things. They haven't happened. The same with heaven.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about what heaven is like, even if the Bible gives hints about them. And the same goes with this kind of, because I cannot say much about what really happened, because I was not there, and even if I was there, I couldn't tell really what happened. But I can still say that heaven exists, or some kind of heaven, and that the end times will come, because we are going towards even if
at
it's
some
like
point,
billions of years, or if it's just around the corner, you know. I would put it in the same category, that it's not a must-know thing. It's but it is a must-believe thing.
Okay.
If you are going to call yourself a Christian, that is that you have to believe.
And here's where I want to be careful, because it's all about the words, right? Because if an atheist hears you say this, I mean, rewind me 7 years. And then we're having this conversation for whatever other reason. It wouldn't be you coming on the podcast, because I wouldn't have the podcast. But I was in Norway and then I met you. When you say that, that's exactly the thing that I would criticize. I mean, you believe in things that are not true, and you just choose to believe. But I think what is foundational is that the resurrection of Jesus is true. It did truly happen, right? And don't you agree with me that the word belief is problematic here?
No, I think it's one of probably the place it belongs most, maybe.
Okay.
Just because of the nature of
in the sense, but when a lot of
No.
when a lot of people say belief, what they imply is that you have no evidence for this.
No, I think we have enough evidence, but even the evidence is not about the mathematical formula for God doing this thing. It's about the people who went there first and saw it, and their testimony, and the lack of voices that tells it wasn't so, and the surrounding proof that tells us that it could only happen.
Yeah, one of the things one of the ways in which my mind expanded a bit is that moving away from atheism, I used to have this very scientific view of the world, but and then there's the reproducibility that comes with that. Like I run an experiment, and as you mentioned, you get the formula for God, whatever that is, but history is not bound by that at all, right? So I think there's a very narrow view. I came to believe it's a very narrow view of what reason is, because we also cannot find the formula for Napoleon or whatever. Like it's just something that happened in history, and it's not. You don't believe in Napoleon, you know Napoleon, and this is why I'm pressing you on this, because like, would you say you believe in Napoleon? You wouldn't use that word, right? You would say, like, yeah, Napoleon existed. It's not you believe in aliens, I guess, or not. I'm not claiming you do or you don't, but just but you believe, but you don't say you believe in Napoleon. So why would you use this word unless that's what you mean to talk about the resurrection, right?
Well, I would say I believe because I cannot know for sure, right? I think I have enough sufficient evidence for the resurrection, but I cannot say that I have to trust those people who made the research, right, in this. I haven't myself gone in and checked that they have done all the logic correctly and everything in the arguments, but I have read the books and I see that, okay, this is believable. I can trust these people. I see that there is a red thread here that works. I see that there is very few counter arguments that you can put in here. So it's sufficient, you know. So you could say that it's a well-founded belief. It's a belief that has some grounding. It's not like belief that in anything. It's not belief in UFOs, you know.
I think, my impression is that we're on the same page. But I have a problem with the word belief, which is likely due to my 20 years of atheism. In the sense that when I hear that word, what triggers in my mind is just like Santa Claus, right?
I would never tell an atheist to just believe, right? Because I don't think that's the right answer to the question about the resurrection. Just believe in it, and that's okay. I don't just believe in it. I do have done my research about it, and I think there is foundation for believing it. But there are things that you have to kind of trust some parts of the story and make small jumps, you know, that are logical, but you can never be 100% sure because.
Well, maybe this is too American. Maybe this is too American for you. But I'm trying to get into your mindset and see. When you're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, whether or not he killed himself, would you use the word believe there? I believe he didn't kill himself.
Yes. No, wait a minute.
Okay,
because I don't know facts about. I think but there's too much mushiness there, you know.
Yeah. So the way I see it, I bring up this thing because, like, look, I think almost every thinking being kind of knows that he did not kill himself. He was killed by somebody who wanted to silence him. I mean, that fits the motive and etc. It's a guy that is about to bring down a lot of powerful people, and then out of a sudden, very conveniently, the camera does not work, and it's like, I mean, it matches the evidence kind of points towards like,
but
everybody kind of
has to be an official.
You don't have any physical, you don't have any physical evidence of that, right? And like all you have is like the motives and etc.
Yeah.
So maybe it is fair. Maybe it is fair to say you believe that in the sense that there's I wasn't there. It wasn't like we will never know. We will never have the evidence that we want, right?
But I wouldn't say to anybody who says that they believe in that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself that you are 100% wrong or you are right. I would say, okay, you may have maybe in the 80% you are correct there because there are.
So in using the word believe to talk about the resurrection, are you then acknowledging that? And this is, I think, it's a great thing. But are you then acknowledging that the person who look at the data and comes to a different conclusion is also potentially reasonable?
Yes.
Okay, then I think I'm very satisfied with that. I think that is a fantastic point to get into, because the truth is, I mean, like, yeah, you can look at all the evidence for, like, it's very hard to deny that Napoleon existed, but I think no scholar, for example, denies that Jesus existed. But when you look at the specific, there's some, but they're fringe, like the mythicists and etc. But like when you look at the specifics of Napoleon's life, you may dispute that he did one thing or another thing, and you will be reasonable. It will be reasonable to have that belief, right? Just even if the overwhelming majority of people don't. Like, depending where you're coming from, so I think it's a good framing in the sense that we can use the word belief, because even though we're satisfied with the evidence and we look at the evidence, so it's not belief without evidence. A person who looked at the same evidence could reasonably, under a different frame of reference, come to a different conclusion. Okay.
I think that's an exciting place to be to discuss it further. I mean, that's why I say I could be still an agnostic, because I accept that there are reasonable arguments for other parts, you know. But for me, just overwhelming evidence show that, okay, there is no reason for me to not believe. There are some questions that are very difficult. For instance, I have a philosopher friend who asked on he's an atheist, and he asked on Facebook once that is God a compound or a simple? And it's very difficult to answer, because if he has compound, he's put together by parts. If it's a simple, then he is just a single entity. But what can a single entity do? Is an 8 atom, or there is very little that can do. And is those two the only choice you have?
Probably not. Like there might be like
our words that fly through the air, they are waves. They are neither particles nor put together of something.
Yes.
So there are more nuance there, but it's very difficult still for me, because I stopped up and I thought about it, and I was like, okay, if it's a simple, is that So it's difficult to put. There are things that sound very difficult on the first glance, and then they are less difficult when you see that maybe that's not all there is. And then, but you're still not sure if you're on the right path, because they are so deep. You have to dig so deep to get some answers, some clear answers.
Yeah. So this was a fantastic discussion, by the way. I absolutely loved that. I was always interested in this, which is why I left the faith. And when I came back, it was true reason, right? And it was always shameful for me to look at my previous self claiming that, religious people are necessarily unreasonable and ignorant and dumb. And because like you can get, as we've hopefully been showing either way, but if I understand your story, yeah, go ahead.
I look back at things that I wrote back then, and I'm ashamed of what I wrote back then.
Like what? Now you're gonna give me an example.
I wrote this assignment at school about Jesus, because we could choose about history, whatever we wanted to write about. And I wrote, okay, I'll write about the historicity of Jesus. And this was right about the time where this James Ossory became famous, because it was discovered, and then they wanted to check if it was real or not, and did it really say brother of Jesus written on it, and was it fake or not? And all these things I put in the book, not the book, but the assignment. It was a long assignment, and I read through it, and I was like, could I write this? Okay, I cannot conclude with that. And I was like, so many mistakes I did in that, so it was. I would never publish it today, So
well, you learn. I mean, it just I think the process of discovery, atheism or theism, is you learn and you improve. But like going back to your personal story, you, I understand, would call yourself today Christian without a church, right? You just that's one of the things you mentioned in the email.
Yeah, I do. I'm a member of a church, and it's a I think it's a Pentecostal, like modern evangelical church, basically. But they are pretty. They don't have like this theology that is set on stone, and I kind of enjoy that. They are more about the people than about the theology. Even if they have,
but in a very respectful way. Now I want to question you on that, because I mean you're so good at it. You read so many books, but go ahead.
The reason I joined there was because they had this preaching about grace that I hadn't gotten much before, and I needed that in that time of my life, because I was coming from this place where they didn't talk about grace at all. So I found this church that talked about grace, and it made sense. So it was very comforting. But then when they talk about grace so much for 10 years, then you're like, okay. It's time to move on. That gave me a lot, but it didn't give me everything that I needed. So
you must have read a lot of the church fathers if you read so many books, right? Yeah, I read, so here in the most respectful way possible, because this is the thing that eventually got me into Catholicism. I'm not going to claim because I think you could. With certain poetic liberties, you could maybe make that claim that some people make the early church was Catholic, but let's not even go there. Don't you agree with me that the Eucharist is very clearly present in the church fathers? I mean, Saint Ignatius very clearly claims in fact he uses that to accuse the Docetists that those cuckoos right there, they don't even believe in the Eucharist as the real presence of Jesus, right? So why isn't that crucial for you? Because for me, and this is what I'm trying to put this in opposition, for me this was one of the things that when I was in this journey, Jesus rose from the dead. People don't raise from the dead. I heard a lot of people in my family who died, they're still dead, and I don't think they will come back, but Jesus did. Now, what are the 40,000 churches? Which one will I join? And then I start when I find the church fathers and when I look at them, when I look at Ignatius, just to focus on him, it's so clear that they believe in this one thing being very central, which is the Eucharist. So why isn't that something that speaks to you?
It speaks to me in one sense, and then the other it doesn't, because I love those stories about people who discover the Eucharist and what it made to them. There's this priest in Norway who became a Christian because he went to Rome, and into a big church there he went and took and figured out the beauty and everything, and then he took the Eucharist there, and it changed his life.
Well, he technically he shouldn't, but I'm glad he changed
I know he shouldn't. And then
God will forgive that one, I suppose. I can't speak for him, but
and then I have heard some personal stories about it, and I'm always fascinating about the real change it has done in a lot of people, right? From my tradition, it hasn't meant that much because we did still do it, and different churches do it different ways, and they put different meanings in it. But when it comes to the real presence, I have difficulty because I'm coming back to when Jesus says, that the Sabbath is not for people, but no, wait a minute. Sabbath is not for God, but for people, right? And I think that's happened. All these things that we do, they are for us. They are not for God. So yes, it's a meeting point, but I don't think we can say that it's a supernatural event that is happening in that meeting point, other than the symbolism.
Well, you use the word that you dislike, supernatural, right? Just
but that's because I cannot say that it's. I wouldn't put it there, right? Because it's for me, it's something that it reinforces the meaning we put in the act, I would say, and that is bias again,
But that's you, that's John. The question that I think it's a more interesting starting point is that, would you agree with me that Ignatius very clearly believed this?
Yeah, of course. But that's Ignatius.
And that's
Not-
Ignatius that was taught by Peter and Paul, right? Just so doesn't that mean, here's the thing. So if Ignatius very clearly believed this, and Polycarp very clearly believed it, and Irenaeus very clearly believed it, and those people were taught by John, Peter, and Paul, wouldn't that imply that John, Peter, and Paul clearly believed it?
No, John, Peter, and Paul, they didn't believe the same things.
Okay,
they have big argument in the Acts about what church should believe and who the church is for and all those things. So they didn't have the truth of all what.
Right. They didn't.
Right.
They didn't agree on every single thing.
They were forming the church. So they made all these traditions. They built a tradition in order for us to have something to preserve, to keep us together, to meet and share, right?
But there is no evidence, like there is evidence in the book of Acts about some of the things they disagreed on, but there is no evidence that they disagreed about this.
That's true.
And then their disciples all believe this. I mean, wouldn't that indicate logically that they all believe this? I'm not claiming you, and you're right to make the distinction. I'm not claiming that they agree in everything perfectly.
No, but right? I don't think the word real presence is in the Bible about it. Right?
Not the word, but the meaning of the word, right?
Not it's Jesus said, "This is my blood." Every time, right? He could have said it in a meaning that it's a symbol of my blood.
He could. He could have said.
So I know there's a lot of arguments there that there are strong arguments for both stands. I've read some of the Catholics.
I agree. By the way, I agree with that. That you can interpret both ways.
Yeah.
You can you can read the same passage and come to the conclusion. Yes, this is really his flesh and blood. Or you can, and this is how I read the text, by the way, and just making the biases clear. And you can read the text and say, well, it's a symbol because he used metaphors all the time, and etc. And of course it's not, and etc. But once you have this difference in interpretation, then don't you think that whatever the people who were really there with him believed is an interesting tiebreaker?
Yeah.
Plus the fact that the Romans, one of the things that they as you I'm sure you know it in one of the 300 books that you read maybe this week, but one of the things that the early Christians were accused of was cannibalism, right? And then like they're cannibals. Why are they cannibals? Because they're eating flesh.
But that comes from the Celsus, I think, or something that is like polemic against Christians. It's not from.
It is, but
Jenny who said that they are having these love meals, or something.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot trust a Roman explaining what they did.
Well, no, but you can, but it's the same as the resurrection.
Yes.
You build a cumulative case, and then you look at. But you can interpret the text as this is my real body and flesh, and you should drink it. The textual.
Right.
What?
They did it. They did interpret it that way, and that's why Romans picked up
exactly
on it.
right.
So they used it as an argument against.
Yeah. So my point is exactly this: if Peter and Paul and John believe that, why wouldn't you?
I don't believe in the Pope either.
Well, yeah, sure, but like we're not talking about the Pope. We're talking
they
about
they believe in the Pope, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So why would I believe in the Pope? But they all believe in the Pope.
Well, again, I don't think it's I don't think, and I do believe in the papacy, but I don't think we have any evidence to say that John necessarily believe in it, right? But the Eucharist, you agree with me on the evidence, right? Like that they fall, the people who were there sitting at the table with Jesus interpreted it that way. So doesn't that lead credence to that interpretation of the text?
I think that those people, we don't have the text close to that time. We have Ignatius, right?
We have Ignatius, and Polycarp and Irenaeus. Like they all mention the Eucharist in some form or another, right? Just Ignatius very explicitly.
Yeah. I think it's something that is very typical in a lot of these early church fathers, that they believe something very strongly. I have read the Didache and the Shepherd of Hermas and all these things. There are some lack of belief there, that even Catholic doesn't believe, right? But they still believed in these things as the original kind of church father thing that they did in the churches. All these rules was present that is not rules anymore because they were not in fashion. Maybe I don't know. But church, some
well,
things.
I don't know if I agree with you. The Didache, I pronounced the Didache, by the way. I don't know who of us is right. But the Didache is very Catholic. I mean, I read there's it's a very short book. I mean, anybody in the audience that wants to get acquainted, you can read it in
I should read it again because it was a long time ago. So. Yeah. But I just remember it was a lot of the things there that I reacted that I haven't seen these beliefs or these rules, right? There's a set of how to do church, right? A lot of those what they
I see all of them in the Catholic Church. I mean, I read it last year, and the only thing, in all fairness, the only thing that is not there is fasting.
Yeah.
But in fact, after reading the Didache, I started trying to fast every Wednesday and Friday, as they claim that you should.
Yeah.
I'm failing at it because I suck, but we'll get there. But fasting, even though not this like regular Wednesday and Friday fasting, the act of fasting is still a practice in the Catholic Church. You fast during Lent, for example.
Maybe I'm just not that familiar with the practices in Catholic Church, but at least from my point, I haven't seen these as big things in the church. They haven't been part of the discussion, at least in the Protestant movement at all. So that makes maybe that's my bias, that I don't feel like they have been present at all, and maybe I should consider looking more into what they mean. But just as the early people, the Christians, didn't read the Bible and was saved, I think that evangelicals can be saved, without doing real presence beliefs, So it's like, how central is it, right? Mm-hmm. Is it the thing, or is Christ dying on the cross even more the thing,
I actually I never shared this in public, and I'm happy to if you want, but I have a very interesting interpretation of the guy on the thief on the cross, But the question is not for me if this is central. The question if this is true, right? Because like that, if Jesus is really present in the Eucharist, right? Here's again. This is how that's my thought process that put me in this journey. But if this is true, like, man, when Jesus was on earth, like, people would do whatever they could to get close to him, and as much as touch him, right? Do you need to touch Jesus to be saved? No, but people did, and people wanted to do, and the ones who did, I mean, were granted something, right? Because it's something that is.
But do you need to believe in the real presence in order for it to be a real presence, or is it real presence regardless if you take the Eucharist?
That is a very interesting question. So, I think first of all, this is a fantastic question, because I keep thinking the other day I caught myself thinking, you know what I think? Maybe God just, even when a Protestant does it, it becomes. Even if they don't believe, like, so maybe this is, but the interpretation that you would have the early fathers putting forward is that you do need a priest. You don't need to believe it. So if a priest does it, like, and this guy that took the Eucharist that shouldn't, that you mentioned, right? It's still the real presence, even if he doesn't believe in it, because a priest was
present.
Like the office of the priesthood is passed from Jesus to the apostles, and then from the apostles onwards. And priesthood is something that exists already in Judaism, so like he's just instituting that office.
Then become is priesthood the same as pastorhood?
Well, because you don't have like, and again, I actually find a very interesting line of questioning, because don't tell the Pope, but the other day I did call myself questioning this, like, you know what, maybe that's I believe in the real presence, and maybe it's there whether.
Three high values are there, you know.
Yeah. I will. I do have to.
I think my mother had. I cannot say it's my mother because I don't remember if it's my mother, but at least I heard the stories about people who got saved by doing the Eucharist themselves without the priest present, as well.
What do you mean? What do you mean got saved? Because how do you know? Like that's
no,
the
because
thing, right?
they had this moment of what at home, when nobody is there, and they have some like, okay, what do I need to do, and then they remember this thing that they do in church, and then they're like, okay, I will do it here, and then they do it themselves, and then they put that as a date for when they decided that I will become Christian. And isn't the Bible also telling us that everybody is like we are the priests? Where is it? I feel like I should be more well versed in the Bible.
Yeah, I can't be a Catholic first because I'm not celibate. But so that part.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that. Well, I think it's strange of the God of the universe to say that this is some hard to believe thing that you just have to believe. Or this is what my church will be known for, this thing. But at the same time, it's a profound thing that is something every Christian do, and it keeps the church together in a way. So
again, just for me, this is a very impactful question, though, because this idea that, like, look, if Jesus was present in front of you, you wouldn't need to touch him for anything necessarily. Like he could tell you, like, when you're there here imagine you're there, transport yourself to the first century, and you're there and you're seeing the Sermon of the Mount, you're in the presence of the Lord. I mean, this is real. He's right there with you, right? And even after he's gone, you believe in him, and that, but people would touch him, and that alone, if you had the opportunity to do this, wouldn't you want to do this? And so if you believe in the real presence, for me, this is very impactful. I mean, and it is one of the things that that led me. Again, I do have a bias here to make it 100% clear. That led me to Catholicism, because if you look at the other churches as well, like the Eastern Orthodox and the Coptics, that branch much earlier than modern Protestantism, none of them disagree on the Catholic Church on a lot of those things. Right? The disagreements come later about other things. The disagreement between the Catholic and the Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox, I find it ridiculous. I find it like, why would you? Who cares? Just it's not at this level at all. But they all agree on this central thing, which is like, Jesus is here. This is not a symbol, right? The idea of this is, I'm not going to say it comes later, which is what some Catholics say. It comes later. No, it doesn't come later, because if he came later, Ignatius wouldn't be talking about it, right? So some people in the first century clearly, those people clearly disagree in the second century, but.
Also, that Paul wrote about it. One of the things he mentioned about Jesus is this, the Eucharist, right? And Paul.
Paul. Yeah.
He wrote not. He wrote before the Bible is written, right? So he has some tradition from before it was written down for the rest of the world, right? So he still included this part in his letter. So. But let's say, for instance, baptism, right? For me, I was not baptized as a child. When I grew up an adult, I decided to do it, but it wasn't like I have to. I didn't feel I had to, I did it because, okay, let's get it over with. Because at least then I can say that I'm baptized. But isn't that one of the even stronger things that Bible says, that we have to be baptized in water and fire or things like that,
Well, yeah. I do believe you should be baptized.
Yes, but right, for me, in my beliefs, I don't think that is that important either. Because it's just a symbol of your faith. It's not your faith, right? I wouldn't say that the gates of heaven, when you come there and then God says, "Well, you were not in water. Sorry, you believed, yes, but Oh, you're not accepted
one
here.
thing is
Right.
one thing is very true, I think, and this seems to be a point of agreement between us, which is like none of us have any idea how God operates.
Yeah.
We like to think that we do, and I think those arguments, to some extent, they are interesting.
Mm.
But the reality is that none of us have any idea how God operates. And the other day, by the way, the Pope the Pope it's an interesting figure, like Pope Francis in particular.
Yeah.
Because he's always on the media for the wrong reasons, and most of the time it's just because the media likes to,
Yeah.
poke the hornet's nest. And when you go see what he truly said, it's being misrepresented. And sometimes he does say stuff that I think he shouldn't. But like he was on fire. He was under fire the other day because he said that he hopes that hell is empty. And by the way, even Catholics, when I say he's under fire, it including Catholics, like maybe especially Catholics, but he got under fire for saying this. Like, I hope hell is empty. But the thing is, I agree with him, and I don't think this contradicts any theology at all, because he's not using the word "I know." He's not using the word "I believe." He's saying, "I hope."
Yeah.
Right. And I do hope the hell is empty. Right. And then you say, well, don't you want Hitler to be in hell? I mean, no, I don't want Judas to be in hell. I hope that there is a way that we're not aware of, that in which, however mechanism we cannot even conceive, that this is just not a thing. Right. So Jesus tells us there is hell, but maybe this is empty. And I don't believe it's empty. But we can certainly hope, and I don't think there's nothing wrong in saying that. But I think it's acknowledging this reality that, like, look, you and I, or the Pope for that matter, or anybody, or Martin Luther, like we have no idea how any of this works, right?
Yeah. I tend to agree. I hope the hell
but I do think baptism is necessary. And the analogy that I came up with, I mean, this is not theology, this is Glauberology, which you shouldn't believe or take seriously at all, is you don't need anything to enter a country. Like, imagine like the United States of America. You can be admitted you show up at the border, and if the president of the United States comes and say, look, come on in, John, you're welcome here. You're in. You don't need a visa to get into the United States. You don't need a visa to get into the United States. The president can. But good luck showing up at the border at the airport saying, here's the law, I don't need a visa, and etc. Because the law says that, like, whoever the president lets in can come in, but then the president sets up this system in which visas are granted, and then you show up. And so my interpretation of that is that, do you need to be baptized? In one sense of the word, no, because God brings into heaven whoever he wants for whatever reason he wants. But at the same time, he's instituting this visa system, and this is an analogy. I'm not saying that baptism is the visa or anything like that. At the same time, there's this system that is instituted, and then he tells you, go do this. So, I mean, you go and do this, because just hoping, by the way, if you haven't done it, that there will be an exception, because I hope hell is empty, right?
Yeah.
Same as the Pope. But this is the way I see this, the baptism thing.
Yeah, I understand that point of view, but it's still one of those things that I find difficult to put my faith in fully. Like, this is the way, without stepping on some logic in my mind, the wall of logic that says doesn't make sense. Why would
it doesn't make sense? Yeah.
But why would a God say water fixes it? Come in.
Well, but Christianity and it is apparently one of the things that a lot of people like about Christianity. That Christianity makes no sense.
Yeah,
right?
I find it makes sense. A lot of it.
You do think it makes sense? Yeah. The other day, I saw somebody arguing, say, "Hey, why would God sacrifice His Son to Himself?" Just like when you think about it, like it doesn't make any sense, right? And yet He did.
Yeah, definitely.
or not. He didn't sacrifice his son.
I'm reading a book about that right now, actually.
Yeah.
So, Cross of Christ, it's called. But yeah, it's difficult to answer without having the theological background to kind of get the whole thing, it seems. So there's a lot of nuance in there, at least as far as I can read. But that has been a difficult question for me as well. Exactly that. Why does it need to happen just this way? And it's yeah. But I enjoy those places where I can wonder about something without needing to have the full answer, you know. Because there's always more to discover, right, in those places, and that includes the baptism and real presence. Yeah.
What do you have you ever looked at the physical evidence for things like the real presence?
No.
Well,
what do you mean by it? Like healing, some things like that, or
not healing. Like again, and this is I'm describing here like my process.
Right? DNA tests from the throat, or
no, you don't. If you take, even according to Catholic doctrine, if you take a DNA test, it's bred, right? Because the accidents are bred. Like it's not in a physical sense that this happens, but there were cases in history that are very well documented in which it did transform physically into blood and flesh. And it's funny. I don't. Now I'm going to just relay something secondhand here, but it's funny that in one of those cases, well, apparently according to tradition, right? What happened is that the priest had doubts. The priest was like, "Is this real or not?" I mean, is it truly a thing? And then when he was during mass, it in his hand it transformed. So I view this as like, wow, it's God showing you that this is real. And I had a guest in the podcast a while back, Raina, that she was saying that in her interpretation, it's actually the other way around. I mean, the miracle is that it transforms into the flesh of Jesus in a way that you cannot tell from bread. I mean, that's the miracle. That's in a spiritual sense, not in a physical sense. This was actually the failure of the miracle to come to fruition because the priest didn't believe, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it didn't happen. I'm not saying I agree or disagree. Like I don't have an opinion about that. But this is also not the only case. There are many other cases in which, obviously, there are many cases in which those things are reported and then they're looked into and are proved to be false. But there are a couple of cases throughout history. This one in particular, which I find the most impressive, in the 6th century. In which it's still there. I mean, you still have that flesh there, and when you test that, and what I find fascinating, the thing that this was probably Ignatius was. I was really like you. I mean, not exactly, but like Ignatius thought that, which is great. I mean, this means something. But I think what finally moved me over was the fact that, for example, you test all of those things, like these pieces of flesh, they're still there. They're still there, but you could say, just somebody put some flesh there, and you know, what does that mean? It could come from a pig or whatever, just flesh. But you test them all, and you know, from the 6th century, from the 8th century, from the 11th century, and they all have the same blood type, which is a very rare blood type to begin with, type AB. They all have the same blood type, and people did not know about blood types until 1900. So the chances, and this is what I like to. I do hope you and the audience agrees that we're discussing like religion and rationality here. This is the rational way to look into this.
Yeah.
If you look probabilistically, the chances that this is the same blood type, which 4% of the population has, male AB, 2% of the population will have, because it's 2% male, 2% female. The chances that in the 6th century, in the 7th, in the 8th century, in the 11th century, hoaxers put heart tissue with blood type AB is minuscule. I mean, the most likely explanation is this is the flesh of the Lord, right?
Well, how I'm just thinking.
Research it and come back to the podcast.
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to put you in the position. Of course, you never heard about it, so just.
But I like with the Shroud of Turin. It's so many unknowns in the question. They have tested that,
which by the way,
that is wrong and right. And,
the same blood type. The same blood type is found in the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium of Oviedo. All of those, the three Eucharistic miracles from before, the three recognized Eucharistic miracles for which because we have other kinds of evidence, but the three of them for which you still have physical evidence, the Shroud of Turin, the Sudarium of Oviedo, and at least two Eucharistic miracles that happened after the 1900s. So those you could argue, knowing that the others are A/B, somebody put, but nevertheless, at least two of them that I know that happened after in the 20th century and the 21st century, they all have the same blood type. They're all, in the case of Eucharistic miracles, they're all heart tissue. They all have very high levels of bilirubin, which is a substance that is injected into the blood over tremendous torture. So for me, all of this leads credence to the fact that it is what it's said to be.
For me, it's a thing that is cool if it's true.
Yeah.
No, it's like, wow, I believe the right things, at least the right person in history. So, but I don't. I think those are so like if I was an atheist, I would just shake my head on those things. It wouldn't mean anything.
It's a fair point. Although I do think that the Shroud of Turin, if it's proved beyond, because for me again, I do believe there is enough evidence. And by the way, a lot of Catholics don't believe in the Shroud of Turin. I'm not saying like the lines are not that easy to draw, but I do happen to believe, and it's one of my favorite subjects. I do happen to believe that it is authentic, and I do think that if it's ever proved like beyond like a shadow of a doubt, like through whatever method, that does prove the resurrection. Like it is physical evidence of the resurrection. The Eucharistic miracles, I agree with you. Like if you are coming from atheism, if anybody would come and tell me, right, just hey, this it doesn't prove anything, but
no.
Once you accept just because all conditional probabilities, once you accept the resurrection, I do think that this settles the real presence. This is my interpretation.
Yeah, it wouldn't change my opinion of a person if he believes in those things. That he is. I wouldn't say that you're a fool for doing that, or that you are anyway. Misled, as I can do with the mythicists, I can say that they are fools and misled. Right? So there are, but I'm more interested in the other things they have to say, not that thing, because that thing is still so out there.
So what is the most important thing for you then?
The most important thing? In regards to
because
faith,
we talked in the faith, because we talked a lot about this, right? Just this doesn't matter, this other thing doesn't matter, like the theological differences don't matter, but like and I'm not even saying like why would you pick this church versus another. It seems that you're very flexible with that. I mean, that's the impression that you exude. But in being a Christian, what is the most important thing? What is the thing that should you stop doing tomorrow, then you wouldn't call yourself a Christian anymore?
I mean, if there was some real evidence for Jesus that he somehow undermined everything, that would probably make a lot of doubt enough to maybe push me back somehow. But is holding my faith up is the what Jesus says in the Bible and how it's acted out through history proves to me that it's true, because otherwise it wouldn't work. Right. You can look at I mean, everybody would say that about their own beliefs, that it works because look at the
Yes.
great people back.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
but somehow it's more close when you believe in it, and then you kind of maybe you got to reinforce all your beliefs, and you see that okay, this person was a Christian, and he did all these things. This Newton was a Christian. He made this law, rediscovered these laws. Galilei was Christian. He found this. You know, all these things that have so much weight in history, and all of them are back to this one belief. I would never make a belief and like guess that it would change the world in that radical sense, right? So I think that like the totality of that it works so well is a great proof for why it's true as well.
Couldn't you somehow, just putting myself in the devil's advocate position here, couldn't you somehow get into the beliefs without the physical act of the resurrection? Because this is a position, for example, that a lot of people.
But they kind of had that before the resurrection. Yeah. The Jews, right? They had the belief without Jesus.
Oh, but not this. The beliefs had to be they got modified a little bit. So maybe that's the thing that did the trick, right? Just if you think from the point of view of evolution, maybe it is all memetics and evolution and etc. And I don't know. You're not on Twitter, so you probably, or you are very little, as you said, but you may not be aware of the controversy of the day in Christian circles. But like recently, there's been this debate between Jordan Peterson and Richard Dawkins.
I saw some of it.
A lot of people are actually asking me my opinion because on the context of the podcast. And in full disclosure, I haven't watched the whole thing. I've been too busy, but I watched like parts of it. And I know Jordan Peterson, I know Richard Dawkins, because I kind of know where they're coming from. I read a lot of Richard Dawkins, in my atheist phase, and some Peterson now. But he comes from this position in which those things are everything is symbolic, not just the Eucharistic is symbolic. Like Christ is a metaphor, and I don't think that is defensible exactly because of this. Because you come, like any atheist would say, like, yeah, but then you get the same set of beliefs and just enforce them for whatever reason. And like if what matters is the set of beliefs, then you can extract the set of beliefs, and you can arrive at the set of beliefs maybe through an evolutionary path in which you change things here, and maybe it takes 1,000 years to see what doesn't work. But look, over time you can arrive. And I guess the counter argument is that once you arrive at them, how do you keep them, right? Because we arrive at them and we didn't keep them. Like the West as a society, like we abandon it, right? So maybe, and I think this is the Petersonian position, maybe you need the extra belief, which is the belief in the resurrection itself, to sustain the other beliefs. Yeah. But I don't think the belief in the resurrection is sustainable if it didn't happen, right? So it happened, right? Yeah,
it happened. Yeah, but yeah, I see the argument from Dawkins, and I see the argument from Peterson's point, and I'm kind of agree with both in the sense that I understand why Dawkins says what he says and why he wants to get the answer from Peterson that Peterson cannot give, right? That's the thing that I saw, where they were like, do you believe this? And it'll be yes or no. And then Peterson could not answer it because he was all in Jungian archetypes, all this, whatever he does, But at the same time, when I read Peterson, I read all this, like 3 books of his, not the last one though, but, and he makes sense of the world. And the Bible is part of that sense, It's so it's not like it's against human nature. It's built upon how we function because it's the kind of the part of the origins of the human race, right? So it's like in our blood to be how we are, and the Bible explains it very well, both from the creation story and all the like build up of the Old Testament all the way to Jesus came. So I read the book of Jonathan Peugeot.
Peugeot, yeah, I guess
Peugeot,
because he's French Canadian, so it's probably Peugeot, right?
So he wrote this book about symbolism in the Old Testament, from the creation story, and it makes a lot of sense how he puts it up. It's very simple, but it's just like so clear that this is how we are in relation to God, and this is how Earth is in relation to heaven, and all this he puts it into a system. And I was thinking when I read this book that he should write a book about how Jesus makes the same sense, in a way, into how we are created and how the whole story is combined together. And I think it's a strong argument, but I understand that it's not an argument for an atheist like Dawkins, for instance, because you cannot hold those strict rational beliefs and accept that there are.
Well, and I guess it's not an argument because, again, if you have a naturalistic view of the world, and if it's all about archetypes, and if it's all about belief, and if it's all about the utilitarian value of the belief working in creating a benefit in society, like, can you not replace that belief by another, right? In the same sense that, like, in your blood system, you have molecules that attach to other molecules, but and this is how a lot of medicine works. You replace that with something else that fits, the same shape.
But I haven't seen anything that fits the shape as well. It's what best fits the shape, and that's why I think it's a strong argument that belief is true. I have seen so many faiths try to fit the shape. All these new modern Buddhist inspired and Hindu inspired beliefs. They are modern. They have all the chance to make the shape fit, but they miss. So it's. I think it's a strong argument, but at the same time, I'm very fascinated by the Greek philosophers, for instance. They discovered it without a lot of what makes a tick without the need for the Bible in their back of the head. So I think that's more of the.
Wouldn't that be a point in like the Dawkins position favor, in which, like, yeah, you see those guys got it and they got close enough. I mean, you keep them going for maybe another 1,000 years. Like.
Yes, but they also show what the Bible tells about nature, that God created us this way, and we are here to figure it out. So it's not against the belief to think of these philosophers as great thinkers. So
awesome. John, this was a very intense conversation. I appreciate it a lot, man. And as I said, for me, this podcast is all about showing that my personal motivation was to show that, like, hey, like, we are all technologists, right, or involved in technology in a way or another. And there is this idea that there's an idea that I had, right? Oh, you believe in those fairy tales for in a completely irrational way. And I hope for the audience, like, this conversation showcases and I think maybe because of the benefit that we didn't know each other before, like other conversations, it's not that they were not like that, but we spent a lot more time on the commonalities. And I think today we could really showcase, like, just how much thought you personally put towards this, like in your journey, like leaving a church and going to another one, this whole process. And I'm fascinated by your approach. I'm fascinated by your bookshelf behind you, and I enjoyed the conversation a lot. Yeah.
Me too. It was nice. I think it's very important at least for me to find that there are other believers that are thinking, that are also in the tech world, because I think I feel so lonely when I'm going to work and I'm the only one that believes, and I want to explore more at work as well, but it's like it's difficult to find.
I get a lot of DMs. Yeah, I get a lot of DMs and messages from people telling me exactly this. So I mean, this is this was an unintended consequence. Like, this is not why I started this, but it is one of the things that keeps me going, right? But just the sense that I keep hearing from people that, well, I mean, I feel lonely. Just it is a profession that, because of this rationality, this focus on rationality and the wrong, as we trying to demonstrate, this wrong belief that religion is a detached thing from the realm of rationality. Like we as technologists, we're all atheists, which again was my case, but there you know, I think we're a minority. We are a minority. I'm not going to claim like that's clearly the case. I mean, the status quo is at the very least agnosticism, but we're not alone. There are a lot of us out there, and if even I'm fairly dumb, so if even I could get into that conclusion, like anybody in the audience can too. So it was a pleasure having you here today, John. I hope you have a fantastic evening. And
I think you do a good job with this podcast. It's a nice, very nice thing to be familiar with and hear the discussions you have and all these things. It's top. That's what it is.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.